it's a hard argument. That usually they're taking one shot at.
So you take care of those, and then I'll come to the table to talk about video games with you.
Well, it's first of all, you made a valid point. It's a combination of all these things. We need to tackle a bunch of things. Yeah, white people are getting angrier. Clearly, you're seeing what he's talking about on there. Okay, so white people are getting angrier. You got the incels. We got a whole new thing now about all these guys that nobody cares about, nobody dates, nobody loves, and all they do is play video games, and they're getting pissed over it. Wait, let me just make this point. That's two. You got all the gun issues, and what can we do to curb that? That's another one. We got mental health. The kids are on medicines for suicide that make them commit suicide. The medicines aren't working. We're not addressing it. How about there's 7 pieces to the puzzle? How about there's 10? You're right. I don't know which one we address first, but this isn't because of one reason. This is 10 reasons.
As a sociology major, we learn about the kind of statistics of crime as part of the course. And so basically what they talk about is in this country, most of the crime is committed, and it's what these two guys have in common. Most of the crime is committed by young, sexually frustrated white males. Now, that's not who's arrested for most of the crime or in prison or in jail, but most of the committed crimes are young, sexually frustrated white males. These two, I think, would both fall in that category, young, sexually frustrated white males. And what's also lethal about these two, they're smart. Young, sexually frustrated, smart white males with the ability, because of our country, to buy these guns, to build a little arsenal, to get these kind of magazines, to practice in their rich home, neighborhood, or whatever, and then perform these crimes. So you really have to, I think, the root of it really does come down to the fact that somewhere in our society, some kids get pushed to the outside. It's just the way that we are. I remember bullying kids when I was a kid. I remember being bullied when we were a kid. And in there is the real root. It's that some of these kids get displaced and they have access to weapons, and then you get your shooting. I mean, that's the root of it.
You understand that the Parkland shooter, Nicholas Cruz, was a throwaway mutt of a person that was in and out of foster care, about 10 families. Nobody wanted him. He was crazy the entire time, a literal throwaway, completely bullied in school by all of those kids that got up and grandstanded. On record, people said those were some of the bullies. The Spanish girl, and her name escapes me, that shaved her head, was one of the bullies. No one talked about that. You want to talk about push to the brink? There's a clear-cut example right there. He made a video telling everybody, I'm doing this. And he was a throwaway, and it's very sad.
Young,
but what are we expecting?
Sexually frustrated, white male, pushed to the brink by society with access to weapons.
So
also,
do you see it stopping?
No, I don't see it stopping. But here's another thing I think, too. That family, what happened to the family that he took the gun out of the house? They took the gun away from him, then they gave it back to him. Now you have this new family that's obviously millionaires. Their son took a weapon out of their house, drove it down to Texas, committed this crime. What is their liability to the people that were shot down in Texas? Can they be sued?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, I would have to imagine
that's a new thing.
That family is going to be facing an army of lawsuits coming at them.
Well, it's the same parental liability with drunk driving. If your son was at a party that you hosted or you allowed at your house, you can be sued. This is a new thing. We're always looking for how many people we can sue. Isn't it funny? You may not put them in jail, but you're going to sue them. You're going to get a payday for sure. So that's kind of interesting. It's not even about justice. It's about a payday. Here's the thing about white, sexually frustrated young men. It's a large group. First of all, hey, folks, here's the news.
It's like all of them.
Well, you're right. Only the people of color are getting laid. That's probably true, actually. There's a whole thing going on with that. We can have another show about that. But let me say this.
That's because a tan makes you more handsome.
Apparently so. I must be very ugly. I'm pale white. But so here's the thing. It's a large group of kids. So that's also why this is also a problem. I don't think people know this. Do you know what percentage of the country is white as opposed to these other races? Do you just quick
I
question.
know that we're about or are on the brink of entering the minority for the first time. That's what all these kids are so mad about.
But do you know what the percentage of black people, African Americans, is in the United States?
Not sure. Go ahead.
13%.
Yeah, that's low.
It's
that's
very
really
low. 7%
That's
women,
what everyone's
6%
so scared
men.
of. What's the percentage of Mexicans? Like 2%?
Well,
but they're taking over.
It's not Mexicans. They don't. There may be a number for that. They break it down. But the Latin community, anyone Hispanic, has now overtaken the black community that they didn't used to. So I think they're at about 16%.
It's really about the Hispanic community. That's the one that grows very fast, and it's for multiple reasons.
It is
one,
rapidly
they have
growing.
Big families,
yes.
And two, they're coming into the U.S. through multiple different ports.
They also marry and have children.
And South America has all kinds of problems right now, so people are kind of pouring in from those countries. But I think that ultimately what's fascinating about that is I think that in the streets, South Americans are the least likely to get some kind of discrimination. Like in the streets, in person, people discriminate against African Americans and maybe even Jewish people or whatever. Right. If you see a Spanish person, you're not even really sure what their ethnicity is. But just on the internet, they get a lot of grief. You know, but in the streets, do you know like a Mexican from, say, like, you know, your other buddy? Like, I don't really know. You know, I try to look like Americans.
I try to be good at that. But no, there's vast differences even in the Hispanic community.
It's
people
purely an internet discrimination that goes against the Spanish.
Well, it's where it's most magnified for sure, and therein
it's
lies
definitely
the
not in media, because in like music, for instance, Spanish culture is flourishing in music. So Americans will be like, "Oh man, I hate you. Don't come into my country," but I'll download your song.
Well, they definitely love reggaeton and Jennifer Lopez and Bad Bunny and all those people. But again, well, see, even the Latin community, it's a lot of differences. Like you said,
know what else Americans like a lot?
Yeah,
Latin food.
Yes,
they love it.
They do. Let's
you know, they're like, "Hey, get out of my country, but leave the burrito."
Yes, and interesting enough, Chipotle created and owned by a white man. Talk to me about your NRA angle. We think we've covered a lot about this.
Here's what I think is just the.
Tell me what this is.
This is just the serious reality of the situation, guys. Is that for years, I think the NRA has held our Congress in a stranglehold. Congress members, it turns out, are sheep. I don't know why, but they're kind of sheep, and they got NRA ratings, and if you had a bad NRA rating, the NRA has a big following, and the NRA was able over the years, back when they were really like a good, solid organization, they had all of these discounts. So if you were an NRA member, they had all these affiliations, and you would get discounts on things from like car insurance to all sorts of other different things, and so there was a lot of value in the NRA membership. Also, it had a lot of famous people like Charleston Heston who were involved in it, and most people were supporting the ownership of handguns and hunting rifles. And
it's also been around a long time.
Yeah, and it was
it's got like
very
80 years
honorable organization back in the day.
Right.
Somewhere along the line, the NRA got a little bit corrupt, and the current leader of it was Wayne LaPierre and then Oliver North. Oliver North and Wayne LaPierre got into a public feud over Wayne LaPierre's spending, because as it turns out, the NRA has gotten very big and rich. They had money coming in from a lot of different angles, and the people that were on the board of the NRA were getting paid from different companies. They were getting paid from the NRA. They were getting free stuff.
They're as big a lobby as any.
Yeah,
that
and so
exists.
they had money and stuff coming in from everywhere, and I guess they got a little bit greedy, a little bit money hungry, and Oliver North wasn't feeling it, so he outed Wayne LaPierre for spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on clothing and things that were pretty frivolous. He is
very well dressed whenever I see him.
And that put the NRA's nonprofit status kind of into question. And so the NRA is in a lot of grief right now as they're involved in different litigation and kind of court cases that are going after their nonprofit status and other things that they were involved in. So that is the first part of like the big crack in the NRA. Somewhere along the way, the Russians got involved. And the Russians sent over a girl named Maria Butina. Maria Butina was a Russian spy that worked with Alexander Torshin. Now, Alexander Torshin is part of Vladimir Putin's inner circle, and he is, let me get his actual title here. His actual title is Governor of the Central Bank of Russia, so totally no power, right? Yeah, so this guy is huge, and he sent Butina over, and he funded Butina's group, which is a pro-gun rights group, and her goal was to push basically pro-gun propaganda here in America. And so you can see that like even Putin realizes that our gun laws are kind of backwards, and it's something that he can exploit to do that. And then, well, here's the deal.
Don't we like our guns anyways? That's
Butina,
like being pro-car.
But now when she was involved with the NRA, and there's a lot of stuff there, a lot of money was funneled through the NRA to the Trump organization through donations, because the NRA big donors to the Republicans. So if you need to get big donor money to the Republicans, as in hundreds of millions of dollars, 10, 20 millions of dollars, what you can do is you can funnel that through the NRA. And that's what it looks like was happening in the last election.
Did anyone catch on to this? Because I've never heard the media talk much about
all sorts of stuff about this now. And Butina has already been arrested, and she's been convicted as a foreign spy, and she's serving a term right now of 18 months in prison for her involvement in this whole situation. But this is also stuff that's all sealed. So whenever they're questioned about this in the Russia hearings or in the hearings that we're seeing on Capitol Hill these days, even Mueller was briefly questioned about this. They always will not talk about it because this is part of the ongoing investigation.
Well, it's an interesting perspective. I did not know that Russia was tied into the NRA. I know that the NRA,
big time.
I know that the NRA for sure, through all of this propaganda against them, has taken a tremendous hit. They definitely don't raise money the way they used to. So maybe if there's dirty money, that I'm not so sure. But they definitely are losing their luster as far as the American public, because there was a time they were never getting attacked.
Well, there
It was
was
just
a
whether you
time
supported them or
when
not.
they were
But
actually
now they're on the
for
attack.
sensible gun legislation. So at the NRA back in the day, they would be for, background checks would be something that they were widely for. But as the money came in, they became more and more corrupt. And I think it started with just so much money pouring in from the gun lobby. And then they had NRA TV going, and they were getting money from so many different angles. And it opened a door for the Russians to get in there and start funneling money around and pushing this pro-gun stuff. And so now I think when you look at the NRA, you have to look at someone that is wildly out of step. This organization is not in step with American society. And how can you be a nonprofit when you're, one, spending $100,000 on clothes for just the president of the organization, and two, you're responsible for protecting all of these mass shooters, or enabling really all of these mass shooters? Without the NRA, we would have sensible gun legislation.
Well,
they are standing in the way.
Yes and no. We would definitely be down that path. Do you understand this? I just want very quick a yes or no from you on this. Here's your slippery slope problem on why the people that are gun nuts or NRA members, what their biggest problem is. They don't trust the government. Just hear me out. They don't trust it. There is a paranoid feeling that once you start enacting, whether it's sensible, not sensible, bump stocks, whatever you think it is, they feel it's going to be a gun grab. It's not going to stop. It may take 5 years. It may take 10 years. I think there's a school of thought, and it's a paranoid school of thought, but we just don't know till we know that if you start giving in, and here's why this is such a problem, there's no give or take here, that you'll eventually lose your guns.
Okay.
Can you at least understand there's a
let me
fear
respond
by
to
those
that.
people?
Let me respond to that. If you're one of the people, and I do hear this online all the time, if you're one of the people that's afraid of tyranny, that's afraid of the government taking over, and that's why you don't want to get rid of your gun, then you're a fucking idiot. And you're the exact person whose gun we need to take, because you can't be fucking trusted with a gun. The government has F-16s. They
ain't
have
shooting nobody.
nuclear submarines.
Right.
They have everything in the world that would tell us that there's no chance. If our government wants to keep us in little cages, then you just shut the fuck up and get in your cage, because your little M16 pea shooter isn't going to do a goddamn thing. The only way your pea shooter is intimidating anybody is when you go into the Walmart, or you go into like some situation where nobody has a gun, and now you're the big man on campus and you start terrorizing people. But when the military comes, that same shooter that's in Walmart is going to be running down the street with that M16 scared
That's
to
possible.
death.
But I'm going to let you know you're half right. That those folks in that flyover country heartland that have 100 guns, going to hand it out to all their family, they're going to fight, and they're not going to run after them so fast. But I'm going to tell you what, New York City, San Francisco, L.A., all these no-gun zones, all your liberal cities, those are the biggest, this is a fact, if it's going to go down. Biggest concentration of people, they're going to go after them first. They got to round up the bigger crowds before they go in the heartland and have to really search for all the people in their bunkers. So they're going to go to everywhere where there's mass people. Hold on. And then there's no legal gun owners. In New York, they're all going down, brother. In Manhattan, they're all going down. But they're going to get into a firefight in Iowa, just so you know.
No, that's never going to happen.
What do you
Listen,
mean?
The government would never take your guns. They have no interest in it. The government is lazy. You have to understand, and it's dysfunctional.
Well, there's no logistic
The government
way to
has
do
no
this.
real interest in coming and taking your guns.
Probably
and that's just
not.
something that the Republicans say to keep
It is
us
a
from
talking
getting
point.
sensible gun
It is a talking
legislation.
point.
Because what we're really arguing over is like a fraction of a percent in the stock prices of gun companies. That's all we're really arguing about here. The gun companies have decided that fraction of a percent of their stock that they might lose in this one little category of weapons is worth more to them than your life, than the customer's life.
Yes.
And the customer is so stupid
Sad,
that they've
isn't it?
taken the side of the company. Do you know that if you
Cigarette
have a
companies,
gun,
by the way, do the same
if
thing.
you have a gun in your home, you're way more likely to not protect your home or kill a burglar. You're way more likely to be a victim of gun violence, because somebody either gets it, shoots themselves, gets it, shoots you, gets it, shoots somebody else. So just having a gun in your house
You wanna hear
actually
what's even
increases the chance that you're going to be a victim, not
Interesting possible.
not a defender.
I also want to correct one other thing you said. You talked about the white people, whatever, but actually when you talk about murders, actual gun violence that they list in terms of gun murders, that is not actually the majority of white people. That is majority, and it's majority gang related and drug related. Unfortunately,
Well, because that's a tool of their
that's where
trade.
they are. So
yeah,
just so
when
you
you
know,
get killed by
it's
a
not
white
these mass
person,
shootings, right?
they
It's something
they
like this.
stab you with a steak knife,
or something like
from
that.
Morton's.
But let me say, going back to your other point, you're right. They're never going to be able to truly come for the guns, because I don't think they want to go into a firefight with everybody that has 100 guns. A lot of men are going to die. Listen, if we get to that point, we're already at civil war, so everybody start getting nervous. Because if it gets to that point,
if it was me, right, and I had to try to help the country, what I would do is I would get rid of the assault weapons, and we could have a discussion, a healthy, honest discussion about what assault weapons are. I'd get rid of the big clips, right? There needs to be something in the school level, around middle school and high school, on a regular basis where they're teaching kids not to protect themselves from shooting, but where they're teaching kids not to be shooters, you know, and about like, you know, there needs to be more teamwork, more caring about the outsider. I don't know how to put that in, but that's the real puzzle here. It's going to take years, hundreds of years of evolution before we could even get there. But that's the way that I would try to take a crack at it. Now, if I'm a Democrat and I'm in this race right now, let me tell you something, and a lot of Democrats aren't going to want to hear this. I would steer clear of this issue. There's no winning this issue. There's no decision to be had. Now, you could go in with executive action like Kamala wants to do, which is a smart decision, say, hey, I'll give you 100 days in Congress, put some law together, which they won't, then I'll pass executive action. You could do that. That'll get you some votes. But having a gun debate or trying to come out with reasonable gun legislation is just it's just no man's land. No one can get it done, so it's a waste of time.
Let me ask you this. If the left is obviously very pro-abortion and they made sure that do not touch our abortion rights, right? They're very strong on that. Is there a give that the right feels the same way about their guns and they're like, give me one issue and leave it alone? And for the right, it's their guns, right? I mean, you probably have to say their number one issue, because the left.
What a horrible deal. You're like, hey,
it's a trade-off, isn't it?
Here's the trade-off. If you let us kill adults, we'll let you kill babies.
Welcome to America.
That's what you're saying.
Go to break on that.
You give us the freedom to kill adults, and we'll kill babies.
That's where we're at, folks.
That's a dark fucking place.
Let's trade it. You get your abortions, we'll keep our guns, and everybody's miserable. Episode 7.